The first mistake you'll make in Where Winds Meet is not petting all the cats you come across. Not only does it give you rewards, it's just highly important for the cat's welfare and your sanity, I promise. But I've got a bunch of things you should know, mistakes to avoid, and just generally tips and tricks, regardless whether at the start or the end of the game. Let's go. Where Winds Meet is a free-to-play action-adventure game out now. If you want to download and jump in with me, click the link below. Thanks to Everstone Studios for sponsoring this video. Firstly, I want to talk about 5 settings that you should be changing or at least be aware of. Firstly is the difficulty setting, which you would have set when you first made your character. This can be changed at any time between story, recommended, and expert. One thing to note is that your rewards are not impacted by this difficulty setting. It's entirely up to how you want to play in solo mode, whether you want it to be easier or more difficult. Something to note is that the assist deflection setting that is auto-enabled on the story mode, you can actually disable this on story mode if you just prefer that mode, or even enable it on the recommended difficulty. You can't on expert, however. Now, what I have been doing and the way that I have been playing primarily is on the recommended difficulty with assist deflection set to on, specifically for power attacks only. Now, what this does is it really helps you if you're surrounded by a lot of enemies, and especially in boss fights and when you're just replaying a lot of boss encounters and just getting that assist deflect specifically for those power attacks that will absolutely shred you. And if you just happen to miss those, it just makes that process a little bit easier, so you don't have to worry about missing those counter attacks that you can get from the power attacks if you do parry them correctly. Another one on the game tab as well is the auto use divine craft tools. Setting this to on will mean that the elemental effects that you will have equipped from the divine crafts, the first one you get is like the burn effect on your blade, this will auto use. What this means is you don't have to manually trigger it in any combat encounter. So you don't get an animation for actually triggering it, it just auto uses. So you save yourself that window of time having to trigger it manually yourself and getting that animation. Really valuable to turn on for, say, boss encounters, and when you're repeating a lot of those boss encounters, specifically if you're gear chasing or something like that, just turn this on and just get the free damage from it without having to essentially do anything or have any sort of animation occur. The next is one really for immersion, and that is to turn your chat to exploration mode. This will hide the chat for the most part, so you don't see the chat spam as you're just exploring throughout the world and just really interrupting your immersive experience, which I definitely prefer. A couple of other things in the social settings, you can just disable a lot of the multiplayer or social pop-ups if you prefer, like say guild invites, things like that. If you're getting these regularly and you just don't want them, you can disable these in the other section in the settings as well. I did also want to mention that in the other section here, this is where you can actually bind your account as well. So if you are going to play on multiple platforms, you will need to link your account here in the bind menu on your primary platform before booting it up on the other platform. So you will want to do this while you're in here as well. Okay, there's a lot of content in Where Winds Meet, like just seriously a lot of mini games, things you can do, and with so much to do, sometimes it's hard to know what you should be doing and why. Well, I'd say in the early to mid game, there's really 3 things that you should focus on. The first is the main story progression. There are a ton of good rewards linked to the main story, as well as explaining a lot of the game's core mechanics and systems, including progression, like unlocking things like the Wandering Path, so you can repeat those boss encounters if you're gear chasing, things like that. And then unlocking the Kaifeng region of the map as well is all linked to doing that main story progression. Oddities and region progress is definitely important, more on that in a little bit, and weapon unlocks. Now there are 12 weapon styles in the game that you'll need to seek out to unlock, and the easiest way to do this is to go into the develop tab, click on the locked weapon martial arts and select obtain. This will tell you where you can find the skill theft to be able to actually obtain this martial arts. Some of these you won't be able to do in the early game, like you'll have to wait to get to that second region, but the best one that you should do very early is get the Panacea healing fan. This can actually be gotten very close to the start of the game, as the skill theft dungeon is really close by, but I would wait a little bit until you've, say, got the Veil of Stillness, the invisibility skill, which is actually a skill theft as well that you can go and hunt down if you do want. But for solo mode, having a heal on your second weapon is an absolute godsend. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've been in encounters and I've been struggling for health, and you don't really often have enough time to just be able to pop your potion, your powder, and you might actually just want to switch to that secondary weapon, get yourself a bit of a heal, continue attacking, then switch back to your main weapon and keep on fighting. It's been really helpful just for the flow of combat, having that like backup option to just heal myself. I found it to be really good for solo. Now, I did mention oddities and generally region progression. So Oddities are a big one. The butterfly symbols that you see on your mini map, only on your mini map, by the way, these don't actually appear on the world map. These little butterfly icons indicate that there is an oddity at that location. Now, there are several different ways that you'll complete them. For example, you might just need to jump up high to catch a butterfly, maybe shoot an enchanted like collection of butterflies to unlock the lotus, destroy some crates. There's just a bunch of these different little activities you'll need to do at the location. This will net you some rewards and one of that specific oddity. Now, you'll need to take these back to the oddity vendor in the bamboo abode area of the map. Now, once you're here, there is a vendor that you can talk to, which initially you might need to help him by pulling him out of the ground. But when you do talk to him, you will be able to trade in these oddities for a ton of different upgrades. Initially, these are just passive things like, say, increasing your HP, physical defense, or damage, things like that. But the further you progress in this will give you actual benefits to things in that region beyond your overall stats, right? Like increasing your chance of actually getting loot from specific things like doing outposts or when fighting monsters, which is hugely valuable when you're trying to like farm resources and gear later on, especially from the outpost, as it's a really solid way that you'll get a just random amount of gear as well as experience every time you do these and claim them with the energy, and more on energy in a little bit as well. Now, if you are struggling with health or just combat in general, there's two things as well you should focus on. Firstly, you may have noticed this little icon in the top left, this little red circle. This indicates that you are injured. Sometimes these can auto heal, like sometimes it'll say self-heal possible. You just need to wait a certain amount of time and it might actually heal. Otherwise, you might need to find a healer. The easiest way is to go to the clinic that you go to as part of the main story. Here, there is a doctor that you will have to pay a certain cost in order to be able to heal yourself. And this is well worth doing if you are actually injured, as this does give negative buffs, like the internal injury in the head that I had has a key recovery is reduced by 5%, or I did actually get some muscle injuries, including a bee sting, which isn't great, but the bone stress itself did actually reduce my endurance recovery by 15%. And endurance is the stat that you use when you're just zooming around the world, like double jumping and dashing and everything. So it's kind of important that that doesn't actually have a reduced amount of recovery. Now, while you're at this vendor as well, if you went to that specific doctor, you should be talking to them and increasing your medicinal chest upgrades. So you'll collect these medicinal tails just generally by doing a lot of the activities in the world, completing things in the campaign, outposts, world bosses, etc. This vendor will allow you to trade those medicinal tails in to improve your chest upgrade, which will improve how many of the medicines that you can actually carry yourself and the amount of healing that they actually do to yourself, which is just generally important. As your health does increase, it's also important that, you know, that healing item does actually heal you a bit as well. Speaking of that healing item, did you know that there are higher tiers of them that heal you for more? Well, you can actually go into your bag and click the craft option at the bottom. And this is a menu that you may not have seen before that allows you to craft food for various buffs. You can also craft bows and arrows, as well as construction items that if you are playing around with the housing. But the real kicker in here is the healing powder. You can just generally craft them if you have been running out when you're in the open world. You can craft them if you have the various materials available, so you can never run out of them. On top of the materials required, this does use a resource called stamina, which does refresh daily, but you should have enough if you are just generally crafting, say, the powders and the specific stuff you need, and not just crafting too much of the other items as well. But to unlock the tier 2 of the powder, you will need to go into the profession screen and become a healer. In order to do this, you'll need to complete the healer profession quest, which you can find in the first region of the map. This is basically just teaching you about how the healing mechanic works. Once you have done this, in the professions menu, in the healer upgrades, you will need to upgrade yourself beyond initiate to that next tier to then unlock that next tier of wound balm, which is the new healing medicine that you'll be able to craft. This will use a resource called career notebooks, which you can buy enough of these just to hit that next tier by spending jade fish in the engagement shop store. Once you've hit that expert tier, you'll then be able to unlock the wound balm, and then your healing will be even better. Did you know that when you log in, there are login rewards daily that you can receive in the events tab? Also, if you haven't been logging in daily, you can actually redeem the previous days by using the makeup attempts, which you earn every 150 adventure points, which are earned mostly in co-op play. So you'll have to engage in co-op play if you do want to get those previous days login rewards. Also, don't forget to check your bag for chests, as a lot of chests that you get from, say, the battle pass or various rewards will actually just be in your bag. You'll need to open them in order to actually get the rewards. Like, say, if you've got a weapon chest in your bag or something like that, you won't really have a weapon until you actually open it. There are way more rewards that you should know about. I have a full video going over them, and I'll link that here if you do want to know more about all the various rewards to make sure you don't miss anything. And speaking of not missing things, recycling gear is important. However, once you hit level 41, you'll unlock a feature called tuning. Tuning adds additional passive effects to your gear, and some of that gear will have additional bonuses specifically for tuning, like say granting a purple passive effect, like that does, additional effects, or increased experience for the tuning process. However, it's important to note that tuning is only available for gear above 41, and when you're tuning gear, the gear you'll actually use to say tune the gear piece that you want has to be above level 41 as well. So when your bag is full of old gear that you're kind of thinking you need to do something with, specifically recycling it, which you can do in your bag. Now, when you do this, you'll need to filter the recycler to avoid gear above 41 and make the uniques untraceable as well, so you don't waste those. But the main thing here is to keep that gear that is above 41 so you can use it for the tuning process. Even if it seems useless at this current moment, you might need it later. So do keep gear above 41, but you are free to recycle everything else. That is something that I didn't realize initially, and I recycled all of my gear. That was fun. Energy is a resource that comes into play as you get further into the game, and it's very important to understand how it works and also to use it correctly and not waste things like your pillow powders. So what energy is a resource that we'll use to essentially get rewards, specifically in co-op or any of the repeatable things like Outpost, the Wandering Pass, and those boss fights, etc. When you complete these encounters, you'll be able to use energy to claim the rewards. You can actually claim up to double or triple, etc. of those rewards by spending additional energy. I really like this feature, by the way, because say if you have a limited amount of time or you're specifically after a gear chase from a certain boss, you can then say claim double or triple the amount of rewards, giving yourself a higher chance to get that gear piece or, additional rewards, etc. that you're actually looking for. Now, energy is a resource that does typically replenish over time. Every 9 minutes, you'll gain 1 energy. It takes about 3 days to completely replenish all of your energy. So you will want to make sure you're using some of this every day by doing these tasks in the Wandering Paths or the Outpost that you can complete to get these rewards, just so you're actually replenishing energy, because once you hit that cap, it's not going to go above that number. Now, you will have a resource called pillow powders, but you should be saving these because there's only a finite amount of these, and you only get them from say the breakthrough rewards or the battle pass, and you don't want to be using all of these in the early game, right, until you have unlocked a lot more of the campaign challenges and the outpost challenges, etc. And you kind of know what sort of build you're going for, and say that farming specific gear pieces or just generally what direction you want to take that energy, rather than say wasting all those pillow powders on days that say you may not actually need to, and gear that you're probably going to replace as you get into those higher levels. You're going to want higher tier and higher levels of those gears, so using it at say level 40 or something like that, probably not worthwhile. So do want to save those pillow powders for later. Speaking of saving resources, the jade fish that you can get, you will want to make sure you're spending these, as there is only a limited amount that you can earn, but you do want to make sure you're spending them correctly. So in the engagement shop is where you can spend these jade fish. Now, what's to note here is that there's a few things that you can buy. Firstly, you'll probably be drawn to the gear chest, as I definitely was, because essentially you can then just buy a gear chest and like roll a piece of gear. However, again, as you're leveling up, that kind of becomes a bit of a waste because you'll be replacing that gear anyway, especially in the early levels of the game. What you really want to be spending those jade fishes on is the inner way note chests and the martial arts custom tips. These are hugely important, as the inner way notes and the martial arts tips, you will need to make those breakthrough thresholds for both the inner way and the martial arts, increasing their overall effectiveness, damage, etc. depends on what it is. And the easiest way to just get more of these resources is via this jadefish menu. You can only get about 20 of these each week for these various stockpiles, as they do replenish every week, and they are quite cheap. So I would recommend to make sure you're buying these, as they're the most efficient way to get these custom tips for the martial arts breakthroughs, as well as the inner way notes, as in some cases the inner way notes are quite hard to get, and this just really mitigates that process, as you can get lucky and get some of the really high quality ones quite easy just via this menu. Lastly, I have some critical combat tips for you. Yes, you watching this video.
Who, me?
Firstly is the dual weapon skill. This is unlocked via the talents pretty early on. This is the bottom option on your martial arts. What this does is it auto switches you to the other weapon that you have on your back and attacks at the same time. Use this instead of actually just manually switching between your weapons, because that triggers an animation, not an attack, whereas the dual weapon skill triggers an attack, so you can cleanly flow your attacks together and switch between them, like how I was talking about the healing fan earlier. When you use the dual weapon skill with that healing fan, it actually just heals you, which is the main reason you'd be switching to that weapon anyway. So it's well worth using this and just weaving it in between your attacks, as it will significantly improve your effectiveness in combat. Something else to note is that the mythic arts icons will blink in combat when you can use them to counter enemies. For example, a key one that you'll use is ripping the shield off certain enemies. You'll use the Chai Chi mythic art in order to do this, so do obviously recommend doing that. And the Meridian's Touch removes the protected stamina bar that you'll see on certain enemies that prevent you from staggering them. This won't happen until a little bit later in the game, but you'll notice some enemies that blue health bar that's like underneath their red health bar, sometimes that's like blocked and it won't actually go down. Meridian's Touch will actually break that, so that bar will go down. You can stagger the enemy and then follow up with that massive amount of damage. But let me know anything I've missed down below. Thank you to Everstone Studios for sponsoring this video. Do click the link in the description down below if you want to jump into Where Wins Meet with me. Thank you guys for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is Norza, and I hope you have a great day.